Hey everybody, welcome back to Bob Appetit. This week I wanted to do another recipe from Heroes Feast, the official D&D cookbook. And I thought, how about we do some dwarven meatballs, or Delzoun tide me overs. Ding, ding, ding. For this recipe, we're going to be using a 1/4 cup of heavy cream, 1 egg, 2 slices of dark bread, here we're going to be using rye, with a crust discarded and the remainder torn into pieces. 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter, divided into 2 tablespoons and 1 tablespoon. 1 small yellow onion, finely chopped, kosher salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground allspice, 8 ounces of ground pork, 8 ounces of lean ground beef, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, freshly ground black pepper, 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, 1 1/3 cups of low-sodium chicken broth, 1 teaspoon of light brown sugar, 1 1/2 teaspoons of soy sauce, half a teaspoon of fresh lemon juice, and 3 tablespoons of finely chopped fresh dill or parsley. Here we chose dill. I've wondered why you see meat blends like the pork and beef used here in meatballs and burgers. And come to find out, it is 3 key things: taste, texture, and fat. I couldn't think of a T word. But the idea is that the beef is going to add a ton of taste here, but it gets a bit chewy as it's being cooked. The pork is going to give us that flavor in the fat and also a nice soft texture, which is going to help our meatballs feel light and juicy. The recipe, as it's called out in the book, says in a large bowl, whisk together the cream and egg. Add the bread, mix well, and set aside, stirring occasionally, until the bread is softened, about 20 minutes. Using a fork or sturdy spoon, mash the bread to a paste and set aside. What we're making here is sometimes called a panade. It is a paste of starch and liquid, often bread and dairy. But you can use other ingredients and you can add other emulsifiers like the egg. Now, at first, the panade is going to help hold our meatball together. But as it cooks, the panade is going to turn into a gel that is going to protect our meat proteins from binding together and becoming too dense and drying out. While that's sitting, in a skillet over medium heat, melt 1 tablespoon of the butter. Add the onion and ½ teaspoon salt and cook, stirring until softened, about 4 minutes. Add the allspice and cook, stirring until fragrant, which is about another 40 seconds. Remove from the heat and let cool to room temperature. Preheat the oven to 475 with a rack set in the middle of the oven. Coat a large wire rack with a non-stick cooking spray or unflavored oil such as vegetable oil, and set it in a large rimmed baking sheet. Once the onion mixture is cool, add it to the pork, ground beef, baking powder, a teaspoon of salt, ½ teaspoon of pepper, and the panade. I hope I'm saying that right. And using a large spoon or your hands, mix until well combined and uniform. To help keep the meat from sticking to your hands, you can apply some vegetable oil to your palms and rub it in. This is also known as kitchen lotion. Now with your lotioned hands, form the mixture into generous 1 tablespoon size balls. For these, I actually chose to go for 1 ounce. What you're going to want to do to form the balls is toss it back and forth between your 2 hands, making sure not to actually squeeze, but just let the impact form the shape. This will help ensure that you're not pressing the meat in too tightly and making it too dense. Baking soda might seem like a strange ingredient, but as you've noticed, everything we've done so far is to try to keep the insides of these meatballs nice and juicy, and that's what this does. By adding baking soda, we're going to raise up the pH balance, which is going to help the meat from forming those tight bonds to keep the insides, well, you know. Arrange the meatballs on the rack in the baking sheet and bake until lightly browned, about 20 minutes, rotating the pan halfway through. But Bob, how can we do it in the oven and not the skillet? You won't get that nice browning, the Maillard reactions! Look, at 475, as the fat escapes the center of our meatballs and goes to the outside, it is rapidly going to cook away, and this is going to cause a Maillard reaction. The outside of our meatballs will firm up and get a little bit more tense, giving them a nice shape and color. So, don't be afraid to do it in the oven, and It's kind of easier on big batches. Now we're going to make a quick roux. Wipe out the skillet used for the onions to remove any stray onion bits and set it over medium heat and melt the remaining 2 tablespoons of butter. Stirring constantly, cook until fragrant and a shade darker, about 1 to 2 minutes. Add the flour and cook, stirring constantly until golden, about 2 to 3 minutes. For those of you who have seen my French mother sauce videos, this might remind you of a velouté. For that reason, to help reduce lumping, I've been warming my broth up in a separate pot. Now, gradually add the broth. Continue to whisk often. Cook for about 2 more minutes. Add the brown sugar, soy sauce, lemon juice, and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper and continue to whisk and cook until thickened, about 2 minutes more. Now add the meatballs to the sauce and simmer, stirring occasionally until heated through, about 4 minutes. Stir in most of the dill and taste, adjusting the seasoning with additional salt and pepper if necessary. Transfer to a serving dish, sprinkle with the remaining dill, and serve hot. However, I've chosen to add mine to a baguette and sort of make a meatball sub, a dwarven meatball sub. All right, so I know I said I was making this into a meatball sub, but to just try it out the first time, I'm going to taste it a la balls only. Okay. I gotta stop just taking huge bites. So these things are amazing. They are definitely still moist and juicy. The outside was firm, but the moment I bit into it, it just broke apart. You get a lot of beef flavor, but that pork is really helping with the texture. And the baking powder and the panade really help to capture that moisture inside of it. The dill in the sauce really makes it zing and stand out. This is delightful. I really enjoy this, and it was a lot more springtime than I was expecting for such a heavy looking dish. If you would like to see me do another recipe from Hero's Feast, leave a comment down below on which recipe you'd like to see, and be sure to let me know what your favorite meat blend is for your meatballs. We'll catch you next time, and as always, study at the dinner table.